feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college ruled.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. It's Dom here with Chris. Just a couple comics talking sports here, and we got a good one here today. A really good one.
We're talking totally old school baseball, all the way back into the black and whites.
Definitely. Well, there wasn't so much black in those days.
Well, I was going to say, I mean that by the section, the black players in their own league. We're talking about Rogers Hornsby.
Yeah, probably the greatest second baseman of all time, and probably neck and neck with Ty Cobb for one of baseball's greatest assholes.
Yes, that was something I found interesting. We'll definitely talk about this, but also the greatest right-handed hitter. That's he was on this list of like guys that his batting average is just absolutely insane.
One of his teammates said he could hit 350 in the dark. I mean, like, that's the kind of talented baseball player we're talking about. But let's get into the Rajah. I mean, I'm not a fan of that nickname. Really would have liked to have heard him called the Horn Dog, you know?
Oh, man. But I feel like the Horn Dog wasn't around in that time. The Rajah, I bet everyone was like, man, that's such a great nickname.
Yeah, like for the 1920. What is it, the Blue Rajah from Mystery Men? Come on, let's get this going. Rogers Hornsby, born April 27th, 1896. We're talking some 19th century here in Winters, Texas. Just a very small town in central Texas, kind of between Dallas and Houston. He has his dad, Ed, and his mom, whose maiden name was Rogers, how he got his first name.
Yep.
Because it's kind of unusual. Had 6 kids. 6 kids. Almost fielding a baseball team there.
Almost.
You got yourself an infield with a pitcher and catcher.
Yeah. And then his father died when he was 2.
Yeah.
And then his family ended up moving to Fort Worth when he was about 6, so his brothers could work in the meatpacking industry that was booming in the bigger Texas cities at that time.
You ever go to a meatpacking town before?
No.
Oh, dude, the whole place smells like cow shit.
Oh, yeah. And the... God, what is it called? The fat rendering, whatever that is.
Yeah.
That smells
man.
unbelievable. They actually have a place here in Tucson. That's how I know. When you drive by, you're just like, what is that? You're like, Tuesdays, 1 to 5, don't drive that way.
The olfactory senses are gone.
Yep.
But he started playing baseball at a young age. He had a great quote about that. He said, I can't remember anything that happened before I had a baseball in my hand. And if God was creating a baseball player, especially for this time period, it was Rogers Hornsby.
Well, it's just interesting because we see him even at like 10, he takes a job in this meatpacking
to support
industry.
his family.
But during this, he's still playing amateur baseball.
Yeah, he's going the Mel Ott route, playing for the meatpacking baseball team and various kind of like sandlot teams.
Well, it's just that this is very common for guys playing baseball at this time. It's not like you would play for your one school team and that's it, or your one club team and that's it. You literally would just bounce around and play, like you said, in sandlot teams.
Who's got a game going? Is the Beast back behind the fence?
Mm-hmm.
But he dropped out of high school when he was 15 because he played for the baseball team to keep working at the meatpacking plant.
And, well, I feel like in this time, it was looked at as something that was like commendable that he dropped out of school to start working full time. And it wasn't like he was playing baseball. It was like baseball was a hobby. And he was like, oh, I'm contributing a full-time job to the household.
He's got to help his mom out.
Yeah.
Man.
And school was almost looked at as something that was like selfish and frivolous at the time. And he wouldn't know what a word like frivolous means because he didn't finish school, kids.
Yeah. Stay in school, everyone. Anyway, in 1914, his older brother Everett, who was a minor league baseball player himself, he got him a tryout with the Texas League Dallas Steers.
The Dallas Steers, and I can't believe there's not a pro team in any sport right now called the Dallas Steers.
Yeah, there's only 2 things they got in Texas,
That's
Chris.
what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. We need this team to come back.
But he ended up making the team, and played there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was released pretty quick.
Released pretty quick. But then again, the dude's only like 18 years old.
Yeah, he's a kid. He's still a kid and playing not organized baseball at this time. So I feel like this is one of his big organized baseball jumps. And they were like, all right, that was a good little tryout.
And then he makes another Class D Texas League team, and he's making a cool $75 a month, which player salaries today in comparison, dear Jesus.
Well, I mean, it's the field of dreams. He's just like, I heard you can play at night, so you can get a job at night, so you can play during the day. And it was just like that's the way it was for
just
these guys.
Just see the Goodfellas guy emerge from that cornfield. Mm-hmm. But the team folds a third of the way through the season, and then sold to a team in Denison for $45 and hit .232 in 113 games. But 1915. He's with the Denison Railroaders of the Western Association at $90 a month. Ooh.
You got a raise.
Buku Dolores there. Hits .277, but also made 58 errors in 119 games. So he's baneening it in the field.
Well, I imagine he didn't play much defense at this higher level. So
no.
I imagine he had this learning curve that had to have happened right here.
These are players that aren't in the meatpacking industry.
Exactly. Like everybody can kind of play ball. I was kind of wondering if $75 or $90 is enough for someone to live, and I guess it would be.
In those days, yeah, rural Texas, I mean...
And they're all kind of like, they're almost in a boarding house together and that kind of shit, so like...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like hanging out.
It's like a firehouse, just cooking chili and playing ball.
In spring training of the following year, the St. Louis Cardinals saw potential in Mr. Hornsby and their manager at the time, Miller Huggins, who would later, I believe, manage the Murderers Row Yankees down the road. But this is far, far before that time period. Told one of his scouts to look for major leaguers who could play in this Texas league, and Rogers was one of the guys.
And they bought out his contract.
Yeah, they bought out his contract. And on September 10th, 1915, he finally came in the game as a shortstop at the major league level. So not even 20 years old, and he's in the major leagues.
I was going to say, they bought out his contract and almost immediately injected him into the majors.
Yeah, the Cardinals were one of those first teams who kind of started using the farm system to like develop guys who were younger and things like that. And very fortunate happenstance for old Rogers there, even though he doesn't play a lot during the early portion of his career with the Cardinals, much like Mellott in those episodes.
They could see the potential like other clubs really weren't doing at this time, and they were like, well, we'll wait.
Yeah, and he was the fourth youngest player in Major League Baseball that season.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, just see what the kid's got and let him develop.
But and you could see that they do this because this next season they end up going and picking up another shortstop and so technically they have 3 on the books, and we see that's what they're trying to do is create this competition to see if he could rise up and be their shortstop.
And he certainly does because he's their opening day starter in 1916.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty good. And in his first opening day that year, he had 2 RBIs in a win over the Pirates. And then May 14th, he hits his first home run.
Well, I saw this in spring training. They said his batting was just that's really when his batting became like a lot better than everybody else's, and it was noticeable. And that was the thing that they were saying was just like, he's probably not the best shortstop even on our roster. He's the best hitter that we have, and he's 20.
Yeah, like, I mean, the errors, but God, can this guy hit? In fact, he finished his 4th in the National League in hitting that year with a .313 batting average, and had 15 triples, which is pretty incredible. 1917, he's playing shortstop again, and he has a little issue that year with his family. May 29th, his brother is shot in a saloon.
This is
Texas.
the most Texas thing, and it's just something we won't see anymore. But I imagine some Europeans think this is still like a thing in America, where you're just like,
the Germans definitely do.
If you go to Arizona, you better be careful. But yeah, he gets time off because his brother gets shot in a saloon. I tried to look up to see if there was like a story as to what happened.
Yeah,
but
me
it
too.
just kind of says his brother was shot in a saloon, not like in an argument or like an accident or anything like that. It was just like he took time off for his brother's death.
This might sound terrible, but I feel like under cause of death, it just reads Texas, bitches.
Yes, exactly.
But anyway,
there's 2 kinds of things in Texas. That's all it says.
Yes, that's all it says. He finishes 2nd in the National League that year in hitting with a .327 average, leads the league in triples with 17, total bases with 233, and slugging at .489. So I wanted to bring this up about, as we'll venture further into it, This dude is putting up stats in the National League at certain points in his prime that only Barry Bonds on steroids was.
I was just going to say, nobody puts up these stats across the board. That's the thing that everyone was saying was why he was the best right-handed hitter is for chunks of his career, he was by far the best hitter of all time, not even of his era. It's crazy what a great hitter he is.
And he could hit for average. He could hit for power. He had a very disciplined eye at the plate as far as walks and pitch selection. And
we see home runs become more fashionable. He starts ripping dingers like his name's Dom DiTolla.
Oh yeah,
you're on Tinder. You know what I'm saying?
God.
That's all I'm saying about Hornsby. All right,
the Horn Dog. No,
the Horn Dog. Oh man, I think Dom just got his new nickname, not Hornsby.
Yeah. So in 1918, because there's a war going on over there. I don't know if you know that song, but anyway, he gets a draft deferment because
over here, over there. But yeah, he gets like you were saying, he doesn't get drafted because he technically is
he's actually supporting his family. It's a legitimate draft deferment. One of his brothers is dead. His dad's already dead. I mean, this isn't like a neocon politician in the 60s being like, I'd like a deferment to not go to Nam.
And I want to say this, it also wasn't World War II, it was World War I, which we weren't essentially drafting. Like, there was a draft, but I feel like it wasn't as ridiculous as World War II.
Yeah, well, it went on for a lot longer for America.
That's true, but
I mean, that sequel was, oh boy.
That sequel. Some people say sequels aren't as good.
It ended the same. Anyway,
come on, writers.
Miller Huggins is gone. He has kind of some run-ins with the new manager Jack Hendricks. But
I thought this was interesting because we really start to see him become this guy of really a locker room guy you don't want to have in there. And when Huggins leaves, you're like, oh shit, was he like kind of keeping this under wraps? And he kind of left.
He helped control Babe Ruth, so I'm guessing he did. And
yes.
Ruth wasn't as much of an asshole as Hornsby was.
No, and that's what people were saying was like nobody wanted to play with Hornsby. He was like
Barry Bonds?
Not like Ty Cobb, but a lot like Barry Bonds, where it was, and this was also another thing I found interesting was this was kind of the era where professionals still played with amateurs.
Yeah.
And I imagine that got him so fucking angry because this was something else I found so interesting. He never drank.
He never
smoked. And this was the thing that blew my mind. He never went to the movies because he didn't want it to mess with his eyesight.
I only know of one person because he also wouldn't read because of his eyesight. There's only one MLB player I've ever found that did the same thing, and it was Lenny Psychopath Dykstra.
That's right.
Like, I mean...
I don't know why you put psychopath in there.
Well, I mean, I've read his autobiography.
I mean, there's a couple other players who couldn't read, but it had nothing to do with their eyesight.
Joe Jackson, yeah. Anyway, listen to our Black Sox episode. He had an issue with Jack Hendricks as manager. That year he only hit 281, but on June 17th, he hit a St. Louis resident named Frank Grew with his Buick.
Yep.
It was an accident. But
this guy kind of like stepped out into the middle of the street and he still struck him with his car. And then this guy ends up suing him.
Which is very Tucson-y if you really think about it. Well, I mean, considering all the pedestrians here. What's a crosswalk? I don't know, Tucson! Sorry.
I like to walk in the middle of the street. I disagree with Dom. But I'll tell you what's interesting is he sues him for $15,000, and then
which is a lot of money.
When we see him trying to renegotiate, he can't even get $15,000 for a season. So it was a lot of money. It said it was settled for a lot less out of court, but a lot less still could be a ton of money in that time. So it could have been like $5,000, which is I think $15,000 was like $250,000. In that time. So it was a lot of money for, I mean, like we were saying, baseball players don't make shit.
No, they don't make dick. Why do you think the White Sox threw that World Series?
That's right.
But the Cardinals finished last, and he vowed never to play for Hendricks again. So they bring in a new manager, Branch Rickey.
Well,
same Branch Rickey who got Jackie Robinson in the majors.
That's right. And this is like early on Branch Rickey. But we kind of look at guys, and we're like nowadays we're like, oh, I can't believe guys back in the day wouldn't have this like attitude problem. And Hornsby was literally like, no, it's him, it's Hendricks, or me. And like they were like, well, I guess you're our best hitter, and you're about to be, and we only have this manager for a year, and you're just like, shit. So they bring in Branch Rickey, which it's interesting because they really needed a manager to really corral him, and you don't see this for the rest of his career.
Not really, until he's actually physically managing ball clubs.
That's what they made the decision. They're just like, okay, so you can't be managed.
Yeah. So why don't you manage other people and be kind of an asshole?
Yeah.
But 1919, he's moved to third base in spring training, but he ends up settling in at second base. And like I had said before, probably the greatest second baseman ever. And here's where the run kind of starts. He hits 318, second in total bases, and also in RBIs that year for a second baseman. You remember our 01 Mariners episode where we talked about Brett Boone possibly using PEDs and breaking a record for RBIs by a second baseman?
Whoa. That's a lot of allegations getting thrown to my Boone man.
Oh yeah.
But
that's whose records Brett Boone broke.
Yeah.
Yes, is Rogers freaking Hornsby.
Well, you see him, and this is what I found interesting was he was a porous shortstop, but a great second baseman. And people were saying like his defense kind of gets overshadowed because his hitting is so unbelievably great. Yeah. But he was a great defensive second baseman.
Yeah, much like another guy we talked about on the podcast, Jeff Kent.
Yep.
Former shortstop, moved to second base.
Well, when they have that skill set, because obviously your best defensive player is going to be shortstop, and then they move him to second base, they're like, oh man, this guy's absolutely wonderful. But I imagine we're not going to talk about his defense again for the rest of the podcast. No. That's why his hitting is so good.
So in 1920, he's moved to second base full-time, starts the season with a 14-game hitting streak, wins a batting title at 370. And mind you, this is when the live ball era starts.
Yeah, this is the year that live ball era starts. So they take away a couple of rules from before to help hitters. And I just want to say in 1919, in the dead ball era, the last year of it, he was essentially the best hitter. Then they were like, you know what? We're going to help you out a little bit, Rogers.
Chicks dig the long ball, Raj.
Chicks dig the long ball.
He led the team in on-base percentage, slugging percentage, hits with 218, total bases with 329, doubles with 44, and RBIs. From a middle infielder. That's how incredible this is. And I mean, the only guy who's really doing this right now is Babe Ruth.
I want to say this just little quote from Grover Cleveland Alexander, who's a Hall of Famer pitcher. He just said this. He said, personally, I don't think there's a more skillful man to ever step up to the plate. And
the man won 373 career games, Grover Cleveland Alexander.
Well, when he said this is why it's so great, because it's the beginning of baseball. When he says this, I feel like it's absolutely true. Like, oh, we've never seen a guy more skilled step up to the plate ever. And you're just like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
He's like those flapper girls on the Nickelodeons you put 5 cents into. But 1921, hits 397. Almost 4 out of every times he goes to the plate, he gets a hit. What the hell, man?
And that's not even
his best season. 21 homers, leads the league in on-base percentage, had 639 slugging, 131 runs, 126 RBIs, 44 doubles, 18 triples. And on September 30th, he's awarded by the St. Louis Cardinals and a baseball signed by then President Warren Harding.
Well, this is because it's kind of like Roger Hornsby's day.
Yeah.
I messed that up. Rogers Hornsby Day. And they were saying like, oh, this is when they start to realize like this is going to be our star. This guy's a huge star in baseball. He's our Babe Ruth. That's kind of like what people are saying when he's coming around, especially with these 21 home runs in this era where you see this is really when people that can hit start hit them out of the park.
Well, like the only other guy leading the NL in homers, as we'll see moving forward, is Mel Ott, besides Rogers Hornsby.
Yep.
But 1922, he's asking for a 3-year deal with $25,000 a season, which for those days is a lot of money. But got 18.5 a season, which was then a new and. On August 5th that year, he sets a new NL record with 28 homers.
Well, I wanted to point this out with his contract. He was asking for 25. He got $18.5, which is a lot less, but still when he got that, he was the highest paid player in baseball.
Yeah.
So thinking about that was like, I mean, I guess that's a good contract for the time. But then he goes out and he's like, oh, he's the best hitter.
And
he
then
really
he
should have got
balls
that
out. Yeah. I mean, he sets new NL records with 40. He finishes the season with 42 homers.
Yep.
250 hits. He had over 720 slugging percentage, which is still the highest of any player with 600 at bats. Meaning that record has not been broken in 100 years.
Not
Chris.
been touched, yeah.
Yeah.
This season, the 22 season.
And he hit 401, which was the highest in the National League since 1897, the year after his birth, which is crazy. And he wins the Triple Crown with 152 RBIs, 46 double, and 141 runs. That's almost a run a game that he's scoring.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Pretty sure he's the only player to ever do the 40-400, which is 40 home runs, 400 batting average. And he is just like the best in this era because you see this Triple Crown, especially the 20s to 20, whatever it is, when he's playing on this Cardinals team. And it's interesting that it's not, because, like, looking back, everybody kind of talks like, so if you're outside of baseball, everybody kind of talks about Babe Ruth. It's interesting that this isn't given more of an attention because it's almost like a better run of batting.
Well, and I must add, I know you said we wouldn't talk about his defense, but that year he led NL second baseman in putouts, double plays, and fielding percentage.
Yep.
Which is
I'm just saying,
amazing.
It gets overshadowed by his unbelievable hitting, but he was a fantastic second baseman.
Yeah, and I mean, like, when you have, like, lists of best second basemen in MLB history, like, the top five is usually the same. You have, like, 2 through 5, it's usually, like, Joe Morgan, Robbie Alomar, Eddie Collins, Ryan Sandberg, and then it's pick 'em between those four. The number one on every single damn list is Rogers Hornsby. And it should be.
Yep.
It should be. 1923, in May of that year, he hurts his knee, and he also fought Branch Rickey in the clubhouse.
Yeah, we can talk about this. He got mad at him. I'll tell you what, it was the dog days of summer.
days.
He got mad at Branch for making a call, and he's like, you could see him out in the game yelling at him, and then they go into the locker room, and the report was that they had to be pulled apart because they were, like, seriously fighting with each other. And their thing came out, like, I think a couple of days later, like, yeah, it wasn't a big deal.
Now, could you imagine in the age of social media,
a
guy like fist fighting with his manager? But even then, in 1923, he wins his 4th consecutive batting title.
Yep.
384, which is a bad year by his standards, I would think. 1924 is when he absolutely goes insane at the dish. Doesn't only hit 400, he hits 424. Which is still the 4th highest in history, a live ball record, because most of the guys doing it before then, like Cobb, were like,
way earlier.
Led the league in walks, 507 on base average. 1 out of every 2 trips.
He was getting on base.
God damn. Slugging percentage led the league at 696, 120 runs, 227 hits, 25 dingers, I must add, because he's getting it done. Taking it the ball deep, and
And this is the first year that they have the
yes, I'm glad,
MVP, and he was actually left off because it was thought that he wasn't a valuable player for his team. He was just a valuable individual player. MLB retroactively gave him this, but still in this time when they first invented the MVP, he was actually left off the list, so they couldn't even vote for him if they wanted him.
You mean to tell me that sports writers are butthurt candy asses and will carry their opinions into voting on things that should be objective?
I'm telling you this, and I'm telling you this is the only time they've ever done it.
The only time. Poor Rogers Hornsby.
That's it. And he's the only guy that has ever been affected by him.
Poor Pete Rose. Poor Shoeless Joe. Poor Barry Bonds. Poor Roger Clemens. Poor Sammy Sosa. Oh, I'm sorry. Sammy Sosa was actually nice to the media. In 1925, Sam Braden, the Cardinals owner, Branch Rickey, and came together, and Hornsby becomes the manager.
Yeah.
Because if he can't play for a manager and you still need his bat in the lineup.
Well, Branch is still in the organization. He's still
he's still part of the front office because he's the one that started their whole farm system stuff. And
so he almost steps away from the manager, and they let Hornsby take over, which is an interesting move.
Yeah, you want to get into that? How they finally convinced Hornsby to take the job?
Oh, how did they do that?
They offered him stock in the team. And originally he told them no, but they offered him stock in the team.
Which is illegal now.
Yeah.
Or
totally.
Not even illegal, but you're like, I guess it is illegal, but you are flat out not allowed to do it. We'll get into what happens to that stock later on, and we'll see why. But it's an interesting incentive. I think we brought it up in one of our first episodes, the Magic Johnson episode, when the Lakers asked him to come back. They kind of gave him stock in the Lakers.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things that in this era, you're like, it's very surprising. Let me say this.
Yeah, but I mean, I think they would have had to have, because it's like, well, we need you to manage, and also you need to, get 600 at bats for us and do Rogers Hornsby things.
I was going to say, you're our star and you're unmanageable.
Yeah.
That's I feel like that's how they were coming after this. It was just like, you're unmanageable.
Could you stop being a dick, Rogers?
Here's a piece of the team.
Yeah. But he rewards them greatly because he goes out and wins another blanking Triple Crown. He wins another Triple Crown. He hits 403, 39 dingers, 143 RBIs, and he won the batting title by 40 points.
Yeah.
Like,
by a shit ton.
Yeah.
And he actually wins the MVP this year because they voted him in. So
yeah, and no NL player has done that since as far as the batting title.
Oh, yeah.
Slug 756, a 1.245 OPS. The only time that's been beat in the National League was, as I said before, 2001, Barry Bonds, who hit 73 home runs. What the shit, man? Like, that's crazy. But 1926...
Oh, before we get into 26, I got a fact that I want to bring up.
All right.
1921 to 25. In this era, he hit over 400. He hit 401 from 1921 to 1925, which, if you think about that, it is just absolutely insane.
I mean, when you look at the guys who've hit 400 since then, like a Bill Terry or a Ted Williams, they're hitting like 4.0 something for the season. Okay, I know Williams hit 4.06. I think Terry, who was the last NLer to do it, hit like 4.01.
Yep.
So I mean, that's just
it's one of the best. I loved that little stat where I was just like, Jesus, Rogers,
Rogers, but yeah, 26 down here for him. He only hits 311, but the Cardinals are no longer in the cellar.
I was going to say, it's an interesting thing where I feel like the manager couldn't pull him back for the betterment of the team, but he could do it.
He could pull himself back. He knew how to handle himself. But
don't you manage a department of one? Yes, and I am very unruly. It's like, Jesus, Hornsby.
I'm one employee of the month for 12 straight months.
That's right.
But they win the pennant that year, and in those days, we probably got into it in our Odd and Fox episodes. If you have the best record at the end of the year in the NL and AL, you make the World Series.
Yep.
And they play one of the best World Series. I know some of the World Series we've talked about on here are considered the best, but this was an epic one for the Cardinals. They had not won a World Series before, and they go play the New York Yankees. And in a thrilling 7 games, they freaking win. They freaking win the World Series. And the final play, Rogers Hornsby's a part of.
Oh, this is a great final play. So Babe Ruth gets walked.
Yep.
And I believe it's like the second pitch. He tries to steal second. Mm-hmm. Who's on second? Our man Rogers. And they actually throw him out.
Yep.
And
famous picture too, by the way.
Yes, very famous. The quote from both guys, I'll give you Babe Ruth's. The first quote was, "I really didn't think they would expect me to steal at this point in the game, and I thought I was going to catch them blindsided."
Yeah, because you get in a scoring position.
And then Hornsby said, what did he say about tagging Ruth out? You got that quote?
I don't have the full quote, but I know that he said it was the greatest moment that's ever happened to him on a baseball field.
That's it. That's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it was. It was his crowning achievement of this win the World Series and like the culmination of everything. And it was
no more boxes to check for Raj.
It's actually the only World Series to end on a throwout, on a guy getting caught stealing.
Stolen base, yeah, that's right. So world champions going into 27. He wants a new contract at $50,000 for 3 years.
This one is when the owner of the Cardinals is really making this decision that the organization needs to move away from Hornsby because he's too controlling.
Yeah, it's like,
even though they just won the World Series.
Yeah, and it's like, well, we got our ring. Maybe we can say goodbye to him. I don't know. But he signs a 1-year deal at $50K. And then that year, the Cardinals get rid of him.
Well, this was I want to talk about this because he doesn't sign this deal.
No, he doesn't end up signing, but that was the offer on the table.
The offer on the table, so he wanted $50,000 for 3 years. He offered him $50,000 for 1 year if he stopped going to the horse race track because he had a horrible gambling addiction on horse betting.
He has no other vices outside of being an asshole, but he liked to play the ponies, and much like Pete Rose with his gambling, wasn't always a winner.
No, he was almost a compulsive loser, and this is kind of what was fucked up is the Cardinals owner knew that he couldn't stay away from the track, so he offered him this deal if he would stop gambling, knowing that he was just like, I think there was a quote that said, hoping that he wouldn't call my bluff.
Yeah.
Because what I found this absolutely interesting. This trade was already set up from when Branch Rickey was actually managing.
Oh my God.
So like they had it set up from a year ago, and they were like still in the mix. Like, well, we know his contract's coming up. We don't really want to re-sign him. If we don't re-sign him, so like New York was kind of waiting for this.
Yeah, they were just. Yeah, John McGraw was probably like, well, time's ticking here.
Well, supposedly McGraw tried to get him in the early 20s. Mm-hmm. That was the other thing was McGraw thought he was the greatest player that was going around, and he tried to get him in the early 20s. When it opened up here in whatever 27,
it was December 20th, 1926. He gets traded. He gets
to the New York Giants,
the New York Baseball Giants, for Frankie Frisch and Jimmy Ring, and they also had to get rid of his stock in the Cardinals.
And that was the other thing I wanted to bring up was he has stock in the Cardinals, and the trade gets approved and then denied because he has the stock, and they said that he has to sell it. He then pretty much forces them to buy it at its premium price.
Yeah, and it was $105 a share. I made note of that. So he's making more money that he can piss away on the ponies.
Yeah, which he does.
27, though, he's still his Rogers Hornsby self on the field. Hits 361, leads the league in runs scored with 133, walks 86, and on base percentage at 448. And yeah, pretty darn incredible. And he also helped manage the Giants with McGraw that year because, well, he's unmanageable, Chris.
I was just going to say, it's interesting because in the beginning of the season, they said that it was a great start. The relationship was really great. And then it was almost like a compulsive need to blow up relationships with him because towards the end of the first season they were with him, all of the front office relationships were soured.
Yeah, the owner, Horace Stoneham, hated the fact that he was gambling all the time, and he ends up getting traded again.
Yep.
He ends up getting traded to the Boston Braves. I don't know if you folks knew that they actually played in Boston, but only team to win a title in 3 different cities, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, interestingly enough. But in 1928, what does he go and do for the Boston? Because if there's one thing, you know how he's bad at gambling? He's really good at raking at the plate.
I was just going to say, it doesn't matter necessarily where he is always productive at the plate. And I feel like he might be one of the first hired guns where they really realize, like, okay, this guy's a problem, but goddamn can he hit.
He may have spent his last paycheck at the track, but did you see how far that ball went?
Yeah. Seriously, because and unfortunately for some of these guys, they don't get the help off field because on field they're so fucking good.
Oh man, and especially gambling, that hasn't been like, something for therapy until like maybe the 60s, 70s.
Even later, yeah.
28 though with the Braves, he wins his 7th NL batting title. 7. That's like some Bogsy level shit right there. Hits .387, led the league in on-base percentage at .498, slugging .632, 107 walks, and he replaces their manager as well.
Again, this keeps happening. It keeps happening.
I'm the employee of the year. But the team finishes in last place, and the Braves are also ready to get rid of him.
Well, they're in financial straits, and they're when this trade comes in from the Cubs, they offer him
$200,000
and 5 players,
which they desperately need.
They need both. They need just more players to sift through, and they just needed money.
Well, and that's kind of the theme you see with these teams in like these cities with 2 baseball teams outside of maybe Chicago and New York, when you have Philadelphia with 2, when you have Boston with 2, with St. Louis with 2. If you're playing second banana there, you're fucked financially.
Yeah.
I mean, and
there's
Braves,
no TV rights. Yeah. You're really fucked because you're not getting the draw that they thought Hornsby was going to give them, but he really didn't. That was the other thing.
We want to see him hit, but do we want to see him argue with his teammates?
Yeah, exactly. And do we want to see this horrible team that doesn't want to play for him?
Yeah, right. In 29, he goes to the Cubs. He hits .380 with 39 homers, .679 slugging percentage. His 156 runs are still a Cubs team record. Dude, I don't think they played 160. I think this was the era where they were playing 158 games.
Oh, yeah.
So that's basically a run a game. And his batting average was the highest for a Cubs player since 1895. He wins the MVP again. And the Cubs make the 1929 World Series, where they lose to Jimmy Fox's Philadelphia A's.
He actually has a pretty bad World Series.
Oh, he has a terrible World Series by his standards.
Yes, by his standards, which is a bummer. He hits in like the mid 200s and
sets a World Series then record with 8 strikeouts.
Yep.
As the Cubs lose. Well, this is their century of rebuilding, everyone. So when you know they're going to make the World Series, it's really not going to turn out in their favor. But in 1930, I should say, they were playing the Cardinals in a doubleheader, and he broke his ankle.
Yeah, breaks his ankle.
And this is kind of when you start seeing a little bit of a decline with him. Ends up coming back, hits .308 with 2 homers the rest of the way.
And then what does he do?
You go into it. I want to hear you talk about it.
Because I found it so absolutely ridiculous where the only time in which the managers keep their job is like early on when he's like 20s.
Yep.
But the Cubs end up firing Joe McCarthy. And they make our man Rogers the manager again. But this was the only one that I thought was actually slightly legit because he's sidelined with an injury.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of in the decline of his career where a player manager makes sense. All of the other ones were like, all right, this guy, I don't know about this guy.
Let's see how it works. There's not like there's a track record or anything for it. But 1931, on April 24th, I did want to add, he hits 3 home runs in a 10-6 win over the Pirates. 8 RBIs, too. 100 games, only plays half of the time, so he hits .381, 37 doubles, 90 RBIs, and he still leads the league in on-base percentage. Like, that's him going down.
Yeah, it really is.
Like,
it's crazy. 32, he has kind of some weird injuries going on, and so he kind of like pulls himself out, like some boils on his feet or something.
Which is like the most 1930s medical diagnosis you could possibly have.
Well, they told him, they're like, eat more red meat. So he's just eating red meat.
And you're not getting enough iodine in your diet.
Smoking on the bench.
Yeah, there you go. But President Bill Veeck Sr. of the Cubs did not enjoy Rogers' management style.
Well, he thought it was too abrasive, which I imagine it was, and it was like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, if that makes sense.
That's a great analogy.
He wasn't getting the best out of his players. He was like getting the best out of himself. And I'll say this, though, he was a really great tactical manager at this time, but he was such a fucking asshole that nobody wanted to do what he was telling them.
For those of you who are watching this or listening, new drinking game. Every time we say asshole about Rogers Hornsby, you'll probably be drunk by this point in the podcast.
I hope so.
But Anyway, the Cubs end up making the World Series that year. And what ends up happening...
Well, they fire him. So
they fire Rogers first.
Early in the season, they end up making the World Series in 32.
Yeah.
And this is very normal for the time, is they give out World Series bonuses for people who are involved in the team.
Yeah, which they should, obviously.
The team has a vote to see if Rogers should get his World Series bonus.
And how did they vote, Chris?
They voted no.
God.
So they literally were just like, should this guy get money because he kind of helped us out for a couple of years? They were like, no, fuck that guy.
God.
He's got some gambling problems. You guys know that? He's got some gambling debts. Yeah, we know. Fuck that guy.
Let's see you go to the track now, Raj.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. In October 24th, 1932, the Cardinals signed him for 1933 because what better place to go than back home, right?
Yep.
On July 22nd of that year, he records his final hit, and then the following day, the Cardinals waived him. And then, but because he's still a name and still a draw, a second team in that city decides they want to bring him in for fans. And July 26th, he's signed by the St. Louis Browns.
It's interesting because this is where he could kind of still be a name, is in St. Louis, because he has been Rogers Hornsby forever, and he kind of comes in and you see him. He's still able to hit, but he's not the same.
Yeah, he plays up until 1937 with the Browns, who, for those of you who don't know, that franchise, which later became the Baltimore Orioles, horrible. Just like absolutely garbage.
Well, they're the second team in a B market.
Yeah, but I mean, a B market where St. Louis is a baseball town, and people don't want to go and see them.
Yes.
But he plays till 1937, gets 108 at bats, hits 296 still when he's like nearing 40, but he's not the same player that he once was.
And now we get into some Eastbound and Down action.
Now, yes, we do. Let's get into it, Chris. Come on.
And this is kind of the sad thing. So after the Browns, this was something that I heard was said, was he had such a crippling gambling addiction that he was actually in debt when he stopped playing for the Browns. So he starts to get bounced around. They're not even like what you would think of like AAA teams now. They're like they're almost like where he started, like meatpacking plant teams. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Texas League stuff. I did want to bring up one thing with the Browns because the Browns owner, Donald Lee Barnes, Hornsby was paying off some money he loaned to Barnes had loaned to him. And Barnes didn't want it because he got that money at the track, to which Hornsby replied in typical Raj fashion, well, it's better than taking interest from widows and orphans.
Yeah, because he was talking shit. He was like, you take loan interest money. Why wouldn't you take this? That I legitimately won. He was like saying stuff like that.
Oh, my God. Just and he couldn't retire. He had to keep managing these teams.
That's what people were saying. He had to keep being the player manager, and like it was almost like a league of their own, where it was just like, get out there and wave your little hat.
You know he was mentioned in that movie?
Yeah.
He was like, I played for Rogers Hornsby, and he yelled at me when my family came to see the game.
Yes. And you look back, you're just like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Oh, it so makes sense. But yeah, he's managing all over the Texas League. He even manages in Mexico for one season, which is totally Eastbound and Down.
Yep.
Hey, I hurt my nose.
Well, I heard an interesting quote that he felt like the commissioner at the time, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, was trying to keep him out because he was such a horrible gambling addict. But even after his death, teams didn't want him managing.
He was not a first ballot Hall of Famer either. Yeah.
Which is crazy. And you look at this, and it really has to do with the way he treated everybody around him, and his gambling addiction was everybody kind of looked down on him for it.
Yep, and after just bouncing around, coaching in the Pacific Coast League, he managed the Browns in 1952 and then the Reds in 1953, just very mediocre type of success.
But they kind of brought him back, the Browns, as like a name to be like, hey, but it took him like a decade to get back into managing.
Remember these guys?
Yeah.
But he eventually, in 1963, January 5th, dies of a heart attack. And is buried near Austin, Texas. But you want to get into his legacy, though, as a player, not as a person.
Yes, please.
In my own opinion and the opinion of many, one of the greatest hitters of all time. His lifetime batting average of .358 is only bested by two guys, Ty Cobb and Oscar Charlton. 7 batting titles. Only Cobb, Tony Gwynn, Hannes Wagner, Rod Carew, and Stan Musial have as more or as many as that.
Many, yeah.
He led the NL in slugging 9 times, which is still a record. He won the decade Triple Crown in the 20s, which means he had the best batting average, most home runs, most RBIs. The only other guys to do that are Ted Williams and Albert Pujols. That's ridiculous.
He's in this mention of the top guys, and he keeps getting he has so many, you know what I mean, where like, oh, Ty Cobb has like that great batting average. You're like, all right. It's just like he has so many of these things because he has this like amazing, essentially Triple Crown record.
He had over 300 home runs and was the first to do it in the National League. Because we brought that up in the Mel Ott episode, I remember. And his 264 as a second baseman was the most until Joe Morgan broke it in the mid-'80s. Like what I brought up before, Frankie Frisch said he's the only guy I knew who could hit .350 in the dark. And he led the NL in batting average. And this is that area you were talking about from 20 to 25 where he hit over 400. He led the NL in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging, and total bases. There was a great quote I saw from there was a rookie pitcher complained to umpire Bill Clem about the strike zone when he was pitching to Hornsby. He took the pitch. The pitcher thought it was a strike, and the guy goes, When you pitch a strike to Mr. Hornsby, he'll let you know.
And that's perfect, man. That's literally Rogers Hornsby summed up in a sentence because, I mean, to get a hit 2 out of 5 times that you're up to bat is insane.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. He finished his career with 2,930 hits, 541 doubles, 301 home runs, 1,584 RBIs, and a lifetime OPS of 1.010.
It's insane.
That's ridiculous. Just like, he's not brought up as often as he should be, in my own opinion, just because it seems like time has passed. But Rogers Hornsby, one of baseball's greatest assholes, but one of baseball's greatest players.
Yes, I just want to stay one of the greatest players because everyone says he's the greatest hitter, but like we said, he was a great defenseman on the second base. Real quick, please go follow our YouTube channel and our Instagram channels. We always record right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.
Please like and subscribe.